Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Cleantech. It's a roundup of the week's biggest stories you need to know in climate and clean energy in 15 minutes or less. Today is Friday, January 24th, 2025. I'm Renewable Energy World Editor-in-Chief John Engel. Alex Kaufmann from HuffPost will be joining us shortly. But for now, I'm joined once again by Cleantech commentator Mike Casey of TigerCom. Mike, it's great to see you, and thank you for the 2 bags of ground coffee that I got in the mail this week as a Happy New Year present from the TigerCom team. It was very kind. So I'm feeling nice this week.
Well, that's a change. But,
yeah,
John, who's our guest this week? Can I just say it again? Who's
Alex
our guest?
Kaufmann.
Alex Kaufmann. Now, what does Alex Kaufmann's presence on the show mean? You're forgetting.
I don't know what you're doing here.
You owe Vote Solar $5 because you bet me that we couldn't get him on the show. He's on the show. Take the loss. Send Vote Solar the $5. Just take
See,
it like
I listen to you
here.
so infrequently that I didn't even remember making that bet. So that's where we are. Yes, very excited to have Alex on the show. I have you heard it here first piece of news for you, Mike. So I said Renewable Energy World Editor-in-Chief. In a very short amount of time, likely the next episode of this podcast, we are going through a pretty significant rebrand on the media side. We'll be launching a new consolidated website that brings in all of our different media properties, which are Power Grid International, Renewable Energy World, Hydro Review, under the brand of Factor This. So you are going to see a giant media launch associated with Factor This, and that is in no small part due to the support of this podcast and the flagship podcast. So thanks to everyone for listening and supporting.
I am honored to be a barnacle on the hull of your great ship, John Engel.
Yeah.
Your great media
And with
ship.
that, this is the last episode featuring Mike Casey on This Week in Cleantech. Wouldn't that be a way to go, huh?
Well, you know, people are fired under lesser circumstances. So, John, I'm just grateful that HR came and visited me. Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
And my last plug, we just released the conference program for our new event, DTech Data Centers and AI. That is in San Jose at the end of May, trying to really bridge the gaps between data center developers, AI companies, utilities, regulators. Really exciting stuff. So please do go check that out. All right, Mike.
Of course, I'll come give the keynote speech, John. You don't have to message me.
No, instead we got the CEO of Southern Company and Pacific Corp and Arizona Public Service. So we're very excited about that. But maybe we'll find room for old Mikey. All right, Mike, get us started.
Okay. All righty, friends. We have our first story is by Jennifer McDermott at AP. Trump temporarily halts leasing and permitting for wind energy projects. You're up, John Engel.
Yeah, so although wind power generates 10% of the U.S.'s energy and is the nation's largest renewable energy source, Trump signed an executive order to pause offshore wind leases in federal waters and pause approvals, permits, and loans for offshore and onshore wind projects. The Interior Secretary will review wind leasing and permitting for federal lands and waters, focusing on environmental impacts on wildlife, economic costs of intermittent electricity generation, and the influence of subsidies on the wind and industry's viability. The incoming Interior Secretary said offshore wind projects that make sense are already in law and will continue. The trade groups have already said, look, this is just a sliver of the wind industry. A very small percentage end up at least on onshore federal lands. But to what extent the Trump administration uses environmental protections and rules is yet to be seen. So that might be a little bit more severe. But Mike, your thoughts here?
My thought is we should split screen for about 30 seconds. On one hand, we have a splashy announcement from tech billionaires that we are going to invest, $500 billion in data centers? And on the other half of the screen, we're halting a growing source of inexpensive energy at $31 per megawatt that's quick to build and for which the fuel is free. John, we will continue to call them like we see them, but I cannot offer an explanation for how you can reconcile those two parts of the screen. So, John, let's go to story number 2.
Yeah, this one's from Tim McDonald of Semaphore. Trump plots a return to fossil fuel expansionism. Mike.
All right, This Week in Cleantech veteran Tim McDonald explains that in the midst of this opening flurry of anti-clean economy initiatives. It's already been ushered in. It looks a lot like the proverbial spaghetti throw at the wall. We've got Anwar drilling, offshore oil drilling, offshore wind bans, bailing out the international climate treaties. The list goes on. It doesn't seem to dawn on the incoming crew that China is moving very openly to dominating the world's energy future with a real all-of-the-above strategy. The only thing that seems to be explaining the rationale here is to just roll back what the previous guy did, regardless of its merits. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, Tim's view is that Trump is using U.S. oil and gas as a way to make deals with other countries. He's basically saying, if you buy our oil and gas, you avoid tariffs or we'll give you military aid. This strategy has already influenced buyers in Asia and Ukraine, which have increased their U.S. LNG purchases since Trump took office. Many European officials are also open to importing more U.S. LNG since it's one of the few ways to reduce their reliance on Russian energy and helps lower rising power prices that are pushing heavy industries out of the EU. Tim also mentions that if the U.S. shifts its focus away from developing domestic manufacturing for EVs and renewables in favor of a more fossil fuel-oriented foreign policy, it risks falling behind China in clean energy innovation over the next 4 years. Mike, story 3.
Ari Natter, Bloomberg. Trump orders agencies to halt spending from Biden's climate law. John, are you seeing a pattern in this week's news? Just asking.
There's a lot going on in just a few days, wasn't there? I was watching his little gaggle at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office on the very first night in office, just spitballing with reporters. And I'm like, oh, it's back. The show is back. So on his first day in office, Trump asked federal agencies to immediately pause IRA spending, or as Trump would call it, the, quote, green new scam. The pause gives federal agencies 90 days to prove how the frozen spending aligns with the admin's overall energy goals. And right now, it's unclear what will happen with government entities and private sector companies that have been awarded funds. Mike.
When the IRA was passed, in the aftermath, some of the analysts like Jesse Jenkins said that the IRA had been purpose-built to make it difficult to undo. Well, it's time to test that theory out. So the DOE has already allocated more than $170 billion in grants and loans from the IRA and bipartisan infrastructure law, and the EPA's distributed 93% of its IRA grant funding. Reuters has reported on Friday that 84%, or $96.7 billion of the IRA's clean energy grants have already been obligated and are thus protected under any Trump reversal. It's probably worth noting that the bulk of the IRA is in the form of tax credits, but the industrial development that it has spurred is taking place overwhelmingly in Republican-red districts, and it's going to be interesting to see how quickly and if at all the representatives of those areas speak up on behalf of this new reindustrialization of America. John, our fourth story.
Yeah, this one's from the Associated Press. Smoke from fire at California lithium battery plant raises concerns about air quality. Mike, that was a big one.
It was a big one and lots of conversation about it. So let's just go through the facts first. Vistra's Energy lithium battery plant in Moss Landing, the world's largest battery storage plant, caught fire last week. That's not good. But these batteries can experience what's called a thermal runaway, which means they can catch fire and burn very hot, releasing toxic gases like hydrogen fluoride into the atmosphere. Battery fires are hard to manage. You can't just hose them down. The fire crews essentially have to contain them and let them burn out. So it's not clear what caused the fire, but there will be in-depth investigation. Now, on the upside, though it did result in the evacuation of 1,500 people, including, I would add, Canary Media head Eric Wessoff. Fortunately, nobody was injured, and the fire was contained. So let's just keep context here. The East Palestine toxic chemical train derailment was not an argument for getting rid of the chemical industry. This managed incident is not a case for getting rid of the battery storage industry. Big industry has fire risk, whether it's petroleum refining facilities or whatever. This happens across the board, and as clean energy becomes part of the mainstream business mix, it will experience its share of industrial challenges. John?
My only thought here is I would hate to be the clean tech company that made Eric Wessoff evacuate his home. Good luck to you. If you're not in that post-mortem column at the end of the year, you really hung on. You hung on as best as you could. All right. So this fire has obviously shaken the battery industry. I think one important thing to note here, and a lot's going to come out about this story over the next few months. I'm sure there's going to be investigations. I think the governor has already called for one. This was earlier lithium battery technology. This was not LFP, which is more commonly deployed today. It was containerized inside a building. So this was a building fire. So we don't develop most standalone battery storage projects inside anymore. We have a better way of doing this. We have a safer way of doing this. I think this is likely a product of older technology that has already been passed by. But obviously, lessons learned will be important as we continue to try to tell this positive story about battery storage to the broader community. All right, Mike, our last story and our guest this week.
Alex Kaufmann of HuffPo, he co-wrote a piece, Energy Production is at a Record, but Trump declares an emergency. Alex, welcome to the show. Thank you for forcing John to fund the charity, and I'm sorry he lowballed your value. I hold you in much greater value, Alex. I just want you to know. So,
with inflation, who could
That's
say?
so true.
All right.
And you've been on this call, Alex, for 15 minutes, and you already know how full of it Mike Casey is, that he's fabricating this entire story to impress you or to make you laugh.
We have the tape. All right. Mr. Kaufmann, if people have not read your story, which we want them to do as a result of hearing this, what is the big takeaway?
Well, the big takeaway is that when Trump passed this executive order, which is declaring the country's first ever energy emergency, it seemed to discount the fact that we are producing more of the fossil fuels that are likely to benefit from this order than at any point in Trump's own presidency.
So, Alex, then what technologies does it appear the Trump administration wants to favor as part of this emergency response? I think we know the answer, but what is your reporting telling you about the path that's likely to take shape?
Well, so both within that executive order declaring the energy emergency and in a separate executive order entitled Unleashing American Energy, he put a very clear focus on traditional kinds of energy that you might expect. Of course, hydrocarbons, gas, oil, petroleum products, but then also coal, uranium, nuclear power, hydroelectricity, but wind was conspicuously absent, obviously, because there was a separate order essentially banning it on federal lands and federal waters. And solar was absent, as were battery storage and hydrogen. So, very clearly he is looking for the energy needs, both in terms of the grid, where we do indeed have a crisis. So maybe there is some merit to the energy emergency on that front. And more broadly, the overall country's energy production. I think we should expect to see a lot more fossil fuels benefiting from this than renewable or clean tech.
Discussing this story, Alex, is like kind of dunking on the elementary school basketball court.
You were never able to do that. Let's be honest with ourselves, Mike.
I can
no
now.
No chance.
I can't.
Can you?
I'm not that old, dude. Come on. All right,
you're not dunking an 8-foot hoop. Give me a break.
All right. Well, Alex, this is such an obvious question it pains me to even ask it, but might there be a correlation to the people who were down in Mar-a-Lago in October man-whining to Trump about how handcuffed they were in producing oil and gas, which we've never produced more of, not just in the history of Trump's presidency, but in the history of the world? Is there any correlation, Mr. Kaufmann?
Well, I'm not in the business of speculation, although clearly there has been this long-standing relationship between the Trump camp and the fossil fuel industry. And I think that, when listening to the American Petroleum Institute's call earlier this week, or last week rather, it was quite clear that they expected most of their demands to be met by this new administration. Unfortunately, there are real energy concerns that it would be great to see met. We have this burgeoning electricity demand from AI data centers and air conditioning and electrification. And there's only so much that certain technologies they favor that are clean, like nuclear power, can do because of the timeline it takes to build a new reactor. So, leaving out this entire category of energy production, putting aside the, air pollution and climate benefits of using it, seems like a really head-scratching kind of decision, particularly when the Trump administration has set as a separate goal the massive increase in LNG exports. So one wonders, which way would you like it? Are we supposed to be producing massive amounts of natural gas for domestic consumption, for foreign consumption? And if it is for the latter, or a mix of the two, then why aren't there some of the cheapest and fastest to deploy technologies in the mix?
I thought I was bad at math, but John, we are about out of time. We need to go our Cleantecher of the week, and this one is super cool.
Yeah, this week's Cleantecher of the week is Adrien Lelièvre, CEO of PiPop, a French company that's designed the first e-bike that uses supercapacitors instead of heavy lithium-ion batteries. It works by storing energy while braking or coasting downhill and releases it for acceleration or climbing. Congratulations, Adrien. That's pretty cool. I
told you. I want one of those bikes.
I'm in a pretty good mood.
You are. You're very ebullient, but you're going to be going away from us, though.
That's true, and I think I've teased it in previous episodes. But we are expecting our second child right before Valentine's Day, so I will be going on parental leave up to Distributech, coming back for a little bit, and then leaving again. So Paul Gerke will be here in my stead, and I appreciate him for doing that.
Well, and I want you to know, John Engel, you can count on me to stop Gerke from taking over for you.
I thought you were going to offer to be the godfather of my child, and I said, only those who can dunk on the elementary school basketball hoop.
All right. Well, we want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, and Alex Peterson and Claire Guerin for gathering these stories.
Get it together, man. And thank you to Alex Kaufmann for joining us again on This Week in Clean Tech. Please subscribe, give us feedback, and send in those story recommendations. Mike, Alex, thanks, and we'll see you all next time.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.